She was only 7 years old when she stumbled through a blizzard and found a crumbling fairytale cottage hidden in the woods. What little Emma discovered beneath its frozen floors wasn't just shelter from the storm. It was a secret worth $275 million, buried for over 70 years, waiting for someone brave enough to look deeper. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning started like every Christmas vacation should. Magical, full of promise, wrapped in the kind of excitement only a 7-year-old can feel. Emma Chen sat in the back seat of her parents' rental SUV, her small nose pressed against the cold window, watching the world transform into a winter wonderland. They were driving through the mountains of northern Vermont, heading toward a tiny town called Frost Hollow, population 312, where her mother had booked a cabin for the week. Emma's breath fogged the glass as she traced patterns with her finger. Outside, pine trees stood like soldiers draped in white cloaks, their branches heavy with fresh snow. The sky was that peculiar shade of grey that promised more weather to come, but her father had checked the forecast that morning. Light snow, nothing serious. They'd be at the cabin by noon, he'd said, plenty of time to settle in before dinner. Her mother, Rachel, turned around from the front seat with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "You excited, sweetheart?" she asked, tucking a strand of dark hair behind Emma's ear. Emma nodded so hard her whole body moved. "Are there really deer? And can we build a snowman, a really big one?" Her father, David, chuckled from the driver's seat. "We can build a whole snow family if you want. But first, we've got to get there." The road wound higher into the mountains, switchback after switchback, each turn revealing more pristine wilderness. They passed a weathered sign that read, "Frost Hollow, 15 miles." Emma's excitement grew with every mile marker. She'd never been anywhere like this, somewhere so remote it felt like stepping into one of her storybooks. But weather in the mountains has a way of changing without warning. By the time they were 10 miles out, the light snow had thickened into something heavier. Fat flakes swirled around the SUV like they were driving through a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. David leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. The windshield wipers worked overtime, their rhythm a steady thump-thump that filled the silence. "Still good," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Just a little heavier than expected." Rachel pulled out her phone, frowned at the screen. "I don't have any signal." "We're in the mountains," David replied. "We'll get service once we're in town." But 5 miles later, the snow wasn't just heavy. It was a wall, a curtain, a living thing that swallowed the road ahead. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet, then 10. The SUV slowed to a crawl as David navigated carefully, following the faint outline of the road beneath the accumulating snow. Emma pressed her face to the window again, but this time with less excitement and more uncertainty. The trees outside had disappeared into the white. Everything looked the same, endless and disorienting. "David," Rachel said quietly, her voice tight. "Maybe we should pull over. Wait it out." "Where?" he asked, gesturing to the narrow mountain road. "There's nowhere to safely stop. We're better off pushing through to town. It can't be more than a few miles now." That's when they saw the other car. It came out of nowhere, fishtailing around a bend, sliding on black ice hidden beneath the snow. David jerked the wheel hard to the right. The SUV skidded, tires losing purchase, and for a heart-stopping moment, Emma felt the sickening sensation of weightlessness as they left the road. They didn't crash, they didn't roll. The SUV simply slid sideways down a gentle embankment and came to rest against a snowbank with a soft crunch that seemed almost polite. For a long moment, no one moved. Emma's heart hammered in her small chest. Her breath came in short, rapid bursts. "Everyone okay?" David asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm okay," Rachel said, reaching back to touch Emma's knee. "Baby, are you hurt?" Emma shook her head, unable to find words. David tried to drive forward. The engine revved, the tires spun uselessly, whining against packed snow. He tried reverse, same result. They were stuck, maybe 15 feet off the road, but in a blizzard like this, it might as well have been a mile. "Okay," David said, forcing calm into his voice. "Okay, we stay with the vehicle. That's what you're supposed to do. We have blankets, water, snacks. We wait for the storm to pass or for help to come." Rachel nodded, but Emma could see the worry in her mother's eyes, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the emergency supplies in the back. They waited. 1 hour became 2. The snow didn't let up. It intensified, piling against the windows, muffling all sound until the world outside became nothing but white static. The temperature inside the SUV dropped steadily despite running the engine in short bursts to preserve fuel. Emma huddled under a fleece blanket, watching her parents try to stay positive, but she could feel their fear. It leaked out in small ways, her father's jaw clenching, her mother's forced cheerfulness as she suggested they play I Spy, even though there was nothing to see but snow. By the 3rd hour, Emma needed to use the bathroom. She'd held it as long as she could, but finally whispered the truth to her mother. Rachel looked at David. A silent conversation passed between them. "Okay, baby," Rachel said gently. "We'll open the door just for a minute. Stay right next to the car, okay? Right next to it." They bundled Emma in extra layers, her parka, a spare jacket of her father's that hung to her knees, 2 scarves, mittens, a hat pulled low over her ears. She looked like a small, puffy astronaut preparing for a spacewalk. David opened the door. The wind screamed in, bringing with it a blast of snow and cold so intense it stole Emma's breath. She climbed out, her boots sinking into snow that came up past her knees. "Right here, Emma," her father said, pointing to a spot just behind the SUV. "We're right here." She waded through the snow, the wind pushing her like an invisible hand. Everything was white. The SUV behind her was already becoming a vague shape, its outlines softening in the storm. Emma did what she needed to do quickly, her small body shaking from cold and fear. She turned to go back, but in that moment, a gust of wind hit her with such force it knocked her sideways. She stumbled, caught herself, looked up. The SUV was gone. Not gone, she told herself, fighting panic, just hidden, just behind all this snow. "Daddy?" she called out, her small voice swallowed immediately by the wind. "Mummy?" She moved forward, or what she thought was forward. Everything looked the same. White above, white below, white in every direction. "Daddy!" Louder this time, edging toward a scream. Her parents, just feet away, were calling her name too. But the wind scattered sound like seeds, making it impossible to tell which direction voices came from. Emma turned left, then right, then left again, each movement taking her farther from safety, deeper into the storm. She didn't mean to wander. She was trying to find her way back. But in a whiteout, forward and backward become meaningless. Up and down lose distinction. The world becomes a void where every step might be the one that leads to safety or the one that leads to disaster. Emma walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Her legs burned with effort, pushing through snow that seemed determined to pull her down. Tears froze on her cheeks. Her fingers and toes had gone from painful to numb. She couldn't hear her parents anymore. She couldn't hear anything but the wind's constant shriek. She was alone, 7 years old, dressed in layers that did little against the mountain cold, wandering blind through a blizzard that showed no mercy. "This is how people die," a small voice whispered in her mind. "This is how children disappear into the snow and don't come back until spring." But Emma pushed the thought away. She kept moving because stopping meant giving up, and her mother had always told her that Chen women didn't give up, even when things looked impossible, so she walked. She didn't know she was climbing until the ground beneath her feet changed, became less steep. She didn't know she'd entered a forest until the wind suddenly lessened, blocked by unseen trees. And she didn't know she was lost beyond any hope of accidentally finding her way back until she looked up and saw it. At first, she thought she was hallucinating. Hypothermia does that, she'd read once in a book about mountain survival. It makes you see things that aren't there, makes the dying brain conjure comfort in the final moments. But she blinked hard, wiped snow from her eyes, and it was still there. A cottage. Not a modern cabin or a ranger station, but something out of a fairy tale. It stood in a small clearing, half buried in snow, with a steeply pitched roof that wore a thick white blanket. The walls were made of dark stone, fitted together with such precision she couldn't see the mortar between them. A crooked chimney jutted from one side, and incredibly, impossibly, a thin trail of smoke curled from its top. The windows were small and arched, their panes frosted over, but glowing with a warm amber light from within. Icicles hung from every edge, some as thick as Emma's arm, others thin and delicate like crystal needles. They caught what little light filtered through the storm and threw it back in fractured rainbows. The front door was made of heavy wood, so old it looked black, with iron hinges that had oxidized to a deep orange brown. A wreath hung from a nail, though its greenery had long since dried to brittle brown. Emma stood at the edge of the clearing, shivering violently now, her body's reserves nearly depleted. Steam rose from her small frame where snow melted against her warmth. She knew, somewhere in the logical part of her brain, that this didn't make sense. Cottages like this didn't exist in the real world. They existed in books, in movies, in the stories her grandmother used to tell. But cold has a way of making philosophy irrelevant. She stumbled forward, her legs barely responding to her commands. Each step was a negotiation between will and exhaustion. When she finally reached the door, she raised one mittened hand and knocked. The sound was dull, absorbed by the thick wood. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. "Hello?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Please, is anyone home?" Silence. Emma's hand dropped to the iron door handle. It was shaped like a coiled vine, cold enough to burn even through her mitten. She pulled. The door opened. Not with a creak or a groan, but smoothly, almost eagerly, as if it had been waiting. Warm air rushed out to meet her, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke, old paper, and something else she couldn't identify. Something like cinnamon and dust and time. Emma hesitated at the threshold. Every warning her parents had ever given her about strangers and strange places echoed in her mind. But behind her, the blizzard raged on, and her body had begun to shut down. Her fingers wouldn't straighten anymore. Her toes felt like blocks of ice in her boots. She stepped inside. The interior of the cottage was dim, lit only by the glow of a fireplace and what little daylight managed to penetrate the frosted windows. Emma's eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a single large room that served as kitchen, living area, and bedroom all at once. The furniture was old, older than anything Emma had ever seen outside of museums. A wooden rocking chair sat near the fireplace, its curved runners worn smooth. A table stood against one wall, its surface scarred by decades of use. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books whose spines had faded to illegibility, and jars containing things Emma couldn't identify in the low light. A bed occupied the far corner, its mattress covered with quilts so faded their original patterns were mere ghosts of color. But what struck Emma most was the stillness. Not just quiet, but still. The kind of stillness that suggested nothing had moved here in a very long time. Frost covered everything. Not the wet frost of a cold morning, but a thick, crystalline coating that made every surface sparkle faintly in the firelight. It coated the books, the jars, the quilts, even the wooden beams overhead. Yet the fire burned. Emma moved closer to the fireplace, drawn by its warmth like a moth to flame. The hearth was made of the same dark stone as the exterior walls, and a fire crackled cheerfully within, orange flames dancing over logs that looked fresh despite the abandoned state of everything else. She pulled off her mittens with numb fingers and held her hands toward the heat. Sensation returned in painful waves, pins and needles that made her gasp. But it was good pain, the pain of coming back to life. As warmth seeped into her body, Emma's practical mind began asking questions. Who had lit this fire? Where were they now? And why did this place feel frozen in time, preserved like a museum exhibit, but with a fire still burning in the hearth? She turned slowly, taking in more details. On the table, a place setting remained, a tin plate, a fork and knife, a cup, all covered in frost. On the shelves, Photographs in old frames showed faces from another era, women in long dresses, men with serious expressions and outdated facial hair, children in clothes that looked stiff and uncomfortable. One photograph caught her attention. It showed a family, mother, father, two children, a boy and a girl. They stood in front of this very cottage, she realized, recognizing the stone walls and crooked chimney. But the photo was old, the kind of black and white that suggested it had been taken 70 or 80 years ago. Maybe more. Emma moved to the bed, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Beneath one of the quilts, she found something that made her breath catch. Toys, a wooden horse, hand-carved, its paint faded but still visible. A rag doll with button eyes and a dress made from flour sack fabric. A tin car, rusted but intact. A small wooden box that, when opened, revealed a collection of marbles, each one a tiny universe of color swirled through glass. These were a child's treasures, left behind but not forgotten. Emma picked up the doll gently, cradling it like it might break. Embroidered on the doll's dress, in thread so faded she had to squint to read it, was a name. Clara, 1938. 1938. That was over 80 years ago. Emma's mind struggled with the number. Whoever Clara was, she would be old now, maybe even gone. So why did her toys remain? Why was this place preserved like a time capsule? Emma set the doll down carefully and continued her exploration. She found more evidence of the past. A calendar on the wall stopped at December 1943. A newspaper, brittle with age, its headline announcing something about the war effort. A row of coat hooks where small jackets still hung, sized for children. Everything suggested a family had lived here once, had left suddenly and never returned. But the fire didn't make sense. Emma approached the hearth again, studying it more carefully. The logs were definitely burning, definitely real. She could feel their heat, see the flames consuming the wood, watch sparks drift up into the chimney. She knelt down, peering into the fireplace itself. The flames cast dancing shadows on the stone walls of the firebox, and there, just beyond the logs, she saw something odd. A gap in the stones, not a crack or a flaw, but a deliberate space, as if one stone had been removed or had never been placed. Emma's heart began to beat faster. She knew she shouldn't investigate. She should stay by the fire, try to stay warm, hope that somehow her parents would find her or the storm would pass. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially in the mind of a 7-year-old who's grown up on stories of hidden passages and secret doors. She reached toward the gap, her small hand fitting easily into the space. Her fingers touched something, cold metal shaped like a handle. She pulled. Nothing happened. She tried pushing instead. The metal gave slightly, moving inward with a click that echoed through the silent cottage. Then, with a sound like ice cracking, something moved. The back wall of the fireplace, which Emma had assumed was solid stone, shifted. Not much, just an inch or two, but enough to reveal that it wasn't a wall at all. It was a door. Emma sat back on her heels, her mind racing. A hidden door behind the fireplace. This was the kind of thing that happened in books, not real life. But then again, this entire cottage felt more like a story than reality. The logical part of her brain, the part that sounded like her father's voice, said, "Stay here. Don't go exploring. Wait for help." But another part, the part that sounded like her grandmother's voice, telling tales of adventure and magic, whispered, "Open it. Some doors only open once. Some secrets are meant to be found." Emma glanced back at the front door. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault. Even if she wanted to leave, she couldn't. Not in this storm, not with darkness approaching. She was alone in a cottage that shouldn't exist, with a fire that burned without explanation, and a hidden door that had just revealed itself. She made her decision. Emma grabbed one of the logs from the stack beside the fireplace, one that wasn't burning, but had a good solid weight to it. She didn't know why she felt she needed a weapon, but something about the hidden door made her cautious. Using the log as a lever, she pried at the fireplace's back wall. It resisted at first, stuck by decades of disuse and ice, but gradually it gave way, swinging inward like it was mounted on hinges. Cold air rushed out from the gap, colder even than the blizzard outside. It carried a smell of deep earth, frozen stone, and something else, something that made Emma think of old museums and locked vaults. Beyond the opening was darkness, complete and absolute. Emma set down the log and pulled out the small flashlight her father had given her before they left. She'd clipped it to her jacket zipper that morning, a habit he'd taught her. Always carry a light. She'd rolled her eyes at the time, thinking it was parent paranoia. Now, she whispered, "Thanks, Dad." She clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness beyond the fireplace, revealing not a room or a crawl space, but a tunnel. The walls weren't made of stone or earth as she'd expected. They were made of ice, not the white, opaque ice of frozen ponds, but clear ice, the kind you could almost see through. And deep within that ice, things glinted, colors, shapes, objects frozen in time. The tunnel sloped downward gently, its floor smooth as glass. Icicles hung from the ceiling like teeth in a giant's mouth, some as thin as needles, others thick as tree branches. Emma stood at the threshold between the warm cottage and the frozen tunnel, between safety and the unknown. Her 7-year-old brain understood the magnitude of this decision more clearly than she could put into words. If she went down there, into that tunnel, she might not come back. She might get lost. She might get hurt. She might find something wonderful or something terrible. But she'd already survived getting separated from her parents. She'd already survived a blizzard. She'd already found a cottage that shouldn't exist. What was one more impossible thing? Emma took a deep breath, gripped her flashlight tighter, and stepped into the tunnel. The temperature dropped immediately. Her breath came out in clouds so thick they obscured her vision. The ice beneath her boots was slippery, but not as treacherous as she'd feared. Someone or something had made this path, and whoever had made it had intended for people to walk here. She moved slowly, playing her flashlight beam across the walls. The ice was extraordinary, layered and clear, compressed over what must have been decades or centuries, and frozen within it, like insects in amber, were objects: a coin, green with age, a glass bottle with liquid still inside, a book, its pages splayed open, words visible but unreadable through the ice, a pair of spectacles, their lenses miraculously unbroken. A pocket watch stopped at 3:17. Each item told a story Emma couldn't read. Who had placed these things here? Why? The tunnel curved gently, always descending, always drawing her deeper. Emma marked her path mentally. 3 support pillars, 2 sharp icicles she had to duck under, a place where the tunnel widened briefly before narrowing again. She could find her way back. She was sure of it. The air grew colder still, but strangely not unbearably so. It was as if the ice itself regulated the temperature, keeping it just cold enough to preserve, but not cold enough to kill. After what felt like 10 minutes, but might have been more, the tunnel opened up. Emma stepped into a cavern. Her flashlight beam couldn't find the ceiling. It rose up into darkness, lost in heights she couldn't measure. The walls around her were ice, but ice on a scale that made her feel impossibly small. Frozen waterfalls hung suspended mid-cascade. Ice formations rose from the floor like the pillars of a cathedral. Stalactites and stalagmites met in the middle, creating columns of frozen perfection. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was like standing inside a geode made of winter itself, and in the center of it all, barely visible in her small circle of light, was something that definitely didn't belong in a cave. A door. Not a door made of ice or stone, but metal. Heavy, industrial metal, the kind you'd find on a bank vault or a fortress. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall and equally wide, with a wheel lock in the center like something from a submarine. Emma approached slowly, her footsteps echoing in the vast frozen space. Her flashlight played across the door's surface, revealing details. Rivets, seams, and stenciled words, so faded she had to lean close to read them. The words were in a language she didn't recognize at first. Then her brain, trained by years of watching her mother work on international business documents, clicked into recognition. German, and beneath the German, English, property of the Richter Foundation, authorized personnel only. Year of installation, 1942. Emma's hand trembled as she traced the letters. 1942. The middle of World War II. This vault, hidden beneath a cottage in the Vermont mountains, had been built during the war. But why? She circled the door, looking for any other markings, any other clues. On the left side, she found a metal box, its cover frozen shut. She chipped at the ice with her fingernails until it came free. Inside was a lever, and below it, an instruction plate. Emergency manual release, for authorized use only. Emma looked at the lever for a long time. Everything in her 7 years of life told her not to touch it. Don't mess with things you don't understand. Don't open doors that were meant to stay closed. But she'd come this far. And somewhere deep inside, she felt like this wasn't chance. Finding the cottage, finding the tunnel, finding this door, it felt like destiny, like she was meant to be here, meant to discover whatever lay beyond. Her hand closed around the lever. It was cold enough to burn, even through her glove. She pulled. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that echoed through the cavern, like the voice of something waking from a very long sleep, something inside the door mechanism moved. Gears turned. Locks disengaged. The wheel in the center of the door began to rotate on its own, spinning slowly, reluctantly. Emma stepped back, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The door swung open, and beyond it, revealed in the beam of her small flashlight, was a sight that would change her life, her family's life, and the lives of countless others forever. The vault door swung open with a whisper of displaced air that had been trapped for over 70 years. Emma's flashlight beam cut through the darkness beyond, revealing not the small room she'd expected, but another tunnel, this one lined with shelves, crates, and boxes stacked with military precision. Her breath caught in her throat. The walls here were still ice, but reinforced with metal supports that created a framework, a skeleton that held back the frozen weight of the mountain above. The floor was concrete, cracked in places but solid, and her footsteps echoed differently here, more hollow, more final. Emma took one step inside, then another. Her flashlight played across the nearest shelf, and what she saw made her stop completely. Paintings. They were wrapped in what looked like waxed cloth, but the edges were visible, frames peeking out from protective coverings. Some were small, no bigger than a book. Others were massive, requiring their own crates. She could see hints of gold leaf, glimpses of color where the wrapping had torn or degraded over the decades. She moved to the next shelf. More paintings, but also sculptures, small ones, wrapped carefully in the same protective material. Bronze, maybe, or stone. She couldn't tell without unwrapping them, and something told her she shouldn't. Not yet. The third shelf held boxes, wooden boxes with metal clasps. Emma set her flashlight down, angling it so it illuminated her work area, and carefully opened one. Inside, nestled in velvet that had faded from royal purple to dusty lavender, was jewelry. Not costume jewelry like her mother kept in a box on her dresser, but real jewelry, the kind Emma had only seen in museums or in movies about queens and empires. A necklace of diamonds and sapphires, each stone as big as her thumbnail. Earrings that caught her flashlight beam and threw it back in 1,000 directions. A brooch shaped like a bird, its body made of rubies, its wings spread wide in emeralds and gold. Emma's hands shook as she closed the box. She moved to another, opened it, found more of the same. Rings, bracelets, tiaras, pieces that belonged in palaces or locked behind museum glass. She wasn't just looking at treasure, she was looking at history. Her mind raced. Who had put these here? The Richter Foundation, the door had said. But who were they? And why hide all of this in a cave beneath a cottage in Vermont? Emma ventured deeper into the vault. It was larger than she'd first realized, extending back into the ice like a warren of frozen chambers. Each section seemed dedicated to different types of items. One area held what looked like ancient manuscripts, their pages visible through clear protective cases. Another held musical instruments, violins and cellos, in cases that kept them suspended, protected from temperature and time. She found a section filled with books, first editions if the careful labels were to be believed. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, European authors whose names she couldn't pronounce but recognized as important from the reverent way they'd been stored. And then she found the documents. They were stored in metal filing cabinets, the kind her father had in his office, but older, more substantial. Emma pulled open the first drawer, and inside found folders organized with Germanic precision. Each folder had a label, each label written in that same careful hand. She pulled one out at random. Inside were photographs, old black and white photographs showing paintings hanging in what looked like a grand home. Alongside each photo was a document with dense text in both German and English. Emma's reading skills were good for her age, but this was adult language, formal and complex. She pieced together what she could: ownership records, provenance documentation, insurance valuations. One phrase kept appearing: removed for protection, 1942. Emma sat down on the cold concrete floor, the folder open in her lap, her mind working through the puzzle. 1942 was during World War II. She knew that much from school. And she knew that bad things had happened during the war, terrible things, things her teacher had only hinted at because they were too young for all the details. But she also knew that art and treasures had been stolen, hidden, lost. She'd seen a movie about it once, about people trying to save important things from being destroyed. Was that what this was? Had someone been trying to save these treasures? She pulled out another folder, then another. Each told a similar story. Items removed from homes, museums, private collections, all dated between 1939 and 1944. All marked with the same phrase: for safekeeping until conflict resolution. Emma's flashlight flickered. The batteries were dying. Panic fluttered in her chest. She couldn't be stuck down here in the dark. She needed to mark what she'd found, needed to figure out how to tell someone about this. But who? Her parents didn't even know where she was. For all she knew, they were still looking for her in the storm, terrified, imagining the worst. The thought of her mother's face, twisted with worry, made Emma's eyes sting with tears. She'd been so caught up in the mystery of the cottage and the tunnel and the vault that she'd almost forgotten she was a lost little girl who needed to get home. She stood up quickly, grabbed her flashlight, and hurried back toward the entrance. But as she passed one last section of the vault, something caught her eye. A trunk different from the others. It wasn't labeled with inventory numbers or coded references. Instead, painted on its lid in faded letters was a name: Family Richter. Emma's curiosity warred with her need to get back. The flashlight flickered again. She made a decision. 30 seconds. She'd give herself 30 seconds to look, then she'd leave. She knelt beside the trunk and opened it. Inside were personal items, the kind of things you'd take if you had to leave your home quickly and didn't know if you'd return. Photographs, letters, a child's drawing of a house and a family, a woman's scarf still carrying the faint scent of perfume, a man's watch, stopped at 11:43, a leather-bound journal. Emma picked up the journal carefully. The leather was cold, stiff, but intact. She opened it to the first page and read the inscription: Journal of Wilhelm Richter, begun January 1939. The entries were in German, but scattered throughout were passages in English, as if the writer had been practicing or wanted certain things understood by English speakers who might someday read it. Emma flipped through carefully, looking for English passages. She found one dated December 1942. We have completed the transfer. 237 pieces, each catalogued, each preserved. The cottage above serves as both shelter and guardian. Clara and Johann know nothing of what lies beneath their playroom. Perhaps that is best. Children should not carry the weight of the world's treasures or its sins. If we do not return, if the worst comes to pass, then this journal and these items will speak for us. We saved what we could. We hid what we must. And we pray that someday someone with pure intent will find it and return these pieces to their rightful homes, or give them to the world so all may share in their beauty. The code is simple. Seek the rose, follow the ice, trust the child who finds it. For only innocence can unlock what guilt has hidden. Emma read the passage twice, her young mind working to understand. They'd hidden treasures to protect them. They'd built this entire vault, had somehow created this impossible tunnel of ice, all to save art and history from the war. And they'd died, probably, before they could come back for it, just like the cottage suggested, abandoned suddenly, frozen in time. "Trust the child who finds it," Emma whispered. She was the child, she'd found it, and somehow, impossibly, they'd known that someday someone would. Her flashlight flickered a third time, the beam dimming noticeably. Emma closed the journal, placed it carefully back in the trunk, and ran. She retraced her steps through the vault, through the door with its wheel lock, across the ice cathedral cavern, and into the tunnel. Her flashlight died just as she reached the first support pillar she'd noted on the way down. Darkness enveloped her completely. Emma froze, fighting panic. She couldn't see her hand in front of her face. The darkness was absolute, pressing in on her from all sides. Her breathing came faster, louder, echoing off the ice walls. Then she remembered her father's other lesson. If your light fails, stay calm, feel your way, trust your other senses. Emma reached out with her left hand, found the ice wall of the tunnel. It was smooth, cold, unmistakable. She began to move forward slowly, keeping her hand on the wall, shuffling her feet to avoid tripping. The climb back up was harder than the descent. Her legs burned with effort. Her fingers grew numb from constant contact with the ice. But she counted the landmarks she'd memorized, the wide section, the 2 sharp icicles, the 3 support pillars. When she finally saw the faint glow of firelight ahead, she nearly cried with relief. She emerged from the tunnel into the cottage, the warmth of the fireplace feeling like an embrace from the world she'd left behind. Emma collapsed on the hearth, her body shaking from exhaustion and cold and the enormity of what she'd discovered. She'd found a treasure vault worth millions, maybe more. She'd found proof of people who'd risked everything to save beauty from destruction. She'd found a secret that had waited over 70 years for someone to uncover it. And she was just a 7-year-old girl, lost in a snowstorm, who needed to find her way home. What happens next will turn this frozen night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Emma sat by the fire for a long time, trying to decide what to do. The logical choice was to stay put, wait for the storm to pass, hope that somehow her parents or rescue workers would find her. But the cottage, for all its mysterious warmth, had no food, no water, no way to communicate with the outside world. She explored more carefully this time, looking for anything useful. In the kitchen area, she found a hand pump over a basin, tried it experimentally, and was shocked when water, clear and cold, came gushing out. The pipes must run deep below the frost line, fed by some underground spring. She drank deeply, the water tasting of minerals and earth. In the cupboards, she found jars of preserved food, their seals intact, their contents mysterious. She didn't dare eat any of them, couldn't know if they were safe after so many decades. But she did find, wrapped in oilcloth in the very back of the highest shelf, something more recent. Emergency rations, the kind that came in military packets, and a box of waterproof matches. Someone had been here more recently than 1943. Someone had maintained this place, at least minimally, had kept the fire ready to light, had stocked emergency supplies. Emma's hope flickered to life like the flames in the hearth. If someone had been here recently, that meant people knew about the cottage, that meant she might be found. She continued searching, and found more evidence of modern intervention. In a wooden box under the bed, she discovered a 2-way radio, old but not ancient, probably from the 1970s or 80s based on its chunky design. Its battery compartment was empty, but next to it, wrapped carefully in plastic, were batteries. Emma's hands trembled as she installed them, said a small prayer to any god who might be listening, and flipped the power switch. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a small red light flickered on. Static hissed from the speaker. She nearly dropped it in excitement. It worked. After all these years, somehow it worked. Emma pressed the talk button like she'd seen in movies. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? My name is Emma Chen. I'm 7 years old and I'm lost in a storm. I'm in a stone cottage somewhere in the mountains. Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help. My parents are looking for me." She released the button. Static answered her. She tried again, her voice shaking this time. "Please, I'm really scared. I don't know where I am. There's a big storm and I got separated from my mum and dad. We were going to Frost Hollow. Our car went off the road. Please help." Nothing but static. Emma felt tears building again. She blinked them back furiously. Crying wouldn't help. She tried the radio again and again, each time varying her message slightly, hoping that somewhere someone might be listening. On her 7th attempt, the static changed. Just for a moment, she heard something that might have been a voice, so distorted and broken she couldn't make out words. But it was something. It was more than nothing. She pressed the button again. "I can hear you. I'm here. Please, I'm in a stone cottage with a crooked chimney and it has a secret underneath, a tunnel made of ice that leads to a vault with paintings and treasures from World War II. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Someone needs to know. The Richter Foundation, that's what the door says. Please, tell someone." The static shifted again, and this time she definitely heard a voice. Male, urgent, but still too broken to understand fully. She caught fragments. "Reading you. Position. Stay." "I'll stay here," Emma shouted into the radio. "I'll stay by the fire in the cottage. I found it after I got lost in the snow. It's made of dark stone and it has a green wreath on the door. Please find me. Please tell my mum and dad I'm okay." The voice came back, clearer this time. "Emma Chen, confirm. 7 years old. Frost Hollow area." "Yes," Emma's voice cracked. "Yes, that's me. Emma Chen, 7 years old. My parents are David and Rachel Chen. We were driving to a cabin, and the storm came, and we went off the road, and I got lost looking for the bathroom, and I found this cottage. Emma, stay where, rescue, coordinate, weather, dawn." The transmission cut out. Emma tried to re-establish contact, but the static had returned to its normal, meaningless hiss. Either the batteries had died, or the person on the other end had lost the signal, or atmospheric conditions had closed the brief window of communication. But it was enough. Someone had heard her. Someone knew she was alive, and they were coming. Emma set the radio down carefully and returned to the fire. For the first time since stumbling out of the blizzard into this impossible cottage, she let herself feel the full weight of her exhaustion. Her eyes drooped. Her body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. She pulled the quilts from the bed despite their coating of frost and arranged them near the hearth. The frost melted quickly in the fire's warmth, the fabric releasing the scent of lavender and thyme. She lay down, curling into a small ball, and pulled the quilts up to her chin. Before she closed her eyes, she looked around the cottage one more time. This place that had saved her life, this way station between the past and present, this keeper of secrets and shelter for the lost. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, to the ghosts of the Richter family, to whatever force had guided her here. "Thank you." Sleep took her quickly, pulling her down into darkness deeper than the tunnel, deeper than the vault, a darkness that held no treasures except rest. She dreamed of ice and fire, of paintings that moved and jewels that sang, of children playing in the snow while adults hid the world's beauty in the frozen earth. She dreamed of a woman who looked like the mother in the photograph, who smiled at Emma and said, "You found it. You were meant to find it. Now you must help us give it back." Emma woke to the sound of voices. For a confused moment, she thought she was still dreaming, that the people in her dream had followed her into waking. But the voices were real, urgent, coming from outside the cottage. "Emma! Emma Chen!" She sat up so fast the quilts fell away. Grey dawn light filtered through the cottage windows. The storm had passed, and people were looking for her. Emma scrambled to her feet and ran to the door, threw it open. The cold hit her like a wall, but she barely felt it. Standing in the clearing, almost unrecognizable in their heavy rescue gear, were two people. Behind them, emerging from the tree line, were more figures, and beyond them she could see the lights of snowmobiles. "I'm here!" Emma shouted, waving her arms. "I'm Emma! I'm here!" The two closest figures ran toward her, moving as fast as the deep snow allowed. As they got closer, Emma realized with a shock that she recognized them. Not rescuers, not strangers. Her parents. Her mother reached her first, dropping to her knees in the snow and pulling Emma into a hug so tight it hurt. Her father was right behind, wrapping his arms around both of them, all three of them crying and laughing and saying each other's names over and over like prayers. "We thought we lost you," Rachel sobbed into Emma's hair. "We thought we couldn't find you, the storm." "I'm okay," Emma said, her voice muffled against her mother's jacket. "I'm okay, Mum. I found a cottage. It kept me safe." David pulled back slightly, looking at the building behind Emma with an expression of confusion and wonder. "A cottage? We've searched these woods for years. There's never been a cottage here." "It's old," Emma said. "Really old. From like 1943 or something. There's a family, the Richters. They lived here, but they left and never came back." The rescue coordinator, a woman named Sarah according to her jacket patch, approached with a radio in hand. "You're the girl who sent the transmission? About the tunnel and the vault?" Emma nodded eagerly. "It's real. It's all real. Behind the fireplace there's a hidden door and a tunnel made of ice, and at the end there's this huge vault full of paintings and jewelry and all kinds of treasures. The Richters hid them during World War II to keep them safe." The adults exchanged glances. Emma knew that look. It was the look adults gave each other when they thought a child was confused or making things up. "Honey," her mother said gently, "you've been through a trauma. Sometimes our minds create—" "I'm not making it up," Emma insisted. "I'll show you. Come inside, I'll prove it." She led them into the cottage, her parents ducking through the doorway, their eyes widening as they took in the interior. The frost-covered furniture, the ancient belongings, the fire still burning in the hearth. "How is there a fire?" David asked, moving toward it cautiously. "If this place has been abandoned for decades—" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "It was already burning when I got here. Everything's weird about this place. But the tunnel is real, I promise." She showed them the fireplace, showed them the hidden latch, pushed open the secret door. Cold air rushed out, and beyond, the tunnel descended into darkness. Sarah pulled out a high-powered flashlight and shined it into the opening. The beam reflected off ice walls, off frozen treasures embedded in those walls, illuminating the impossible passage. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's real." Over the next hour, as more rescue personnel arrived and the cottage clearing filled with people and equipment, Emma told her story again and again. She told it to the police, to the Forest Service, to a man from the FBI who arrived by helicopter looking both excited and concerned. She led a group down into the tunnel, their lights turning the ice into a galaxy of refracted brilliance. She showed them the cavern, the vault door, the treasures inside. She showed them the journal, the inventory, the careful documentation of everything the Richters had saved. A woman from the Smithsonian, contacted by emergency protocols Emma didn't understand, examined the journal with shaking hands. "This is real," she kept saying. "This is all real. Do you understand what this means? Pieces thought lost forever, items stolen by the Nazis that we never found, private collections we only knew about from records, it's all here." The man from the FBI, whose name was Agent Torrens, knelt down to Emma's level. "You did an extraordinary thing," he said seriously. "You found something incredibly important, but I need you to understand that what you found belongs to a lot of different people. Museums, families, countries even. This is going to become very complicated." Emma nodded. "The journal said to trust the child who finds it. It said to give the things back to their rightful homes or to let everyone see them. That's what the Richters wanted." Agent Torrens smiled. "Then that's what we'll try to do. But you and your family, you're going to need to be very brave for a while. There's going to be a lot of attention, a lot of questions." Emma looked up at her parents, who stood on either side of her, their hands on her shoulders. "We'll be okay," she said. "We're together." By noon, the cottage clearing looked like a military operation. Generators hummed, providing power for lights and equipment. People in various uniforms and official jackets moved in organized chaos, documenting, photographing, securing the site. A tent had been set up as a command center, and Emma sat inside it, wrapped in thermal blankets, sipping hot chocolate someone had provided. Her parents sat with her, refusing to let her out of their sight. Through the tent's clear panel, Emma watched people carefully bringing items up from the vault. Each piece was handled with extreme care, documented, photographed in situ before being moved. She saw the Ferrari painting she'd glimpsed, watched as grown men gasped at the sight of it. She saw the jewelry boxes, the sculptures, the manuscripts. "How much is it all worth?" she heard someone ask. "Preliminary estimate," another voice responded. 275 million, maybe more. Some of these pieces are literally priceless. Cultural treasures thought lost forever. Emma sipped her chocolate and thought about the Richters, about Wilhelm and his careful journal entries, about Clara and her toys left behind, about a family who'd risked everything to save beauty from a war that had consumed the world. They'd succeeded. They'd hidden it all, kept it safe, even if they couldn't come back for it themselves. And 70-some years later, a lost little girl had stumbled through a blizzard and found what they'd left behind. A reporter managed to get past the perimeter later that afternoon, shouting questions before being escorted away. But Emma heard one of them. "How does it feel to be the girl who discovered a $250 million treasure?" Rachel moved to block Emma from view, but Emma spoke up anyway. "It's not my treasure," she called out. "It never was. I just found it. It belongs to everyone now." Agent Torrens, overhearing, smiled. "Smart kid," he said to David. "You raised a smart kid." "She gets it from her mother," David replied, squeezing Rachel's hand. As the sun began to set on what had been the longest day of Emma's life, a historian from the University of Vermont arrived at the site. She'd been studying the Richter family for years, she explained, following scattered clues about a rumored preservation vault, but never finding concrete proof. She asked to speak with Emma, and with her parents' permission, sat down in the tent with her. "I need to know everything," she said gently. "Everything you saw, everything you found, everything you remember. It's important." So Emma told the story one more time, from beginning to end. The storm, the separation, the cottage, the fire, the hidden door, the tunnel of ice, the vault, the journal, the radio, the rescue. She told it all with the clarity of a child who'd lived through something she'd remember forever. The historian listened with tears in her eyes. When Emma finished, she said, "The Richters were remarkable people. Wilhelm was a museum curator in Germany. When he saw what was happening, how the Nazis were seizing art, destroying pieces they deemed degenerate, stealing from Jewish families, he started smuggling items out. He brought them here to America, to this cottage that his wife's family had owned. He built the vault with help from others who believed art transcended politics and war. And then he died in 1944, trying to save one more collection. His wife died shortly after. Their children were scattered to relatives. The secret of the vault died with them." "Until now," Emma said softly. "Until you," the historian agreed. "They wrote in that journal that they hoped a child would find it. Do you know why?" Emma thought about it. "Because kids don't think about money and politics and all that complicated stuff. We just see things as they are. We see a treasure and think it should be shared." The historian smiled through her tears. "Exactly. Wilhelm wrote that only innocence could unlock what guilt had hidden. He meant that the adults of his time had locked away beauty because of greed and hatred and war, but a child, approaching with pure motives, would know instinctively to set it free." Emma looked out through the tent panel at the cottage, now surrounded by lights and people and official vehicles. "I'm glad I found it," she said. "Even though I was really scared. I'm glad it wasn't lost forever." The days following Emma's discovery blurred together in a whirlwind of activity that felt both exciting and overwhelming. The cottage that had been her shelter from the storm became the center of an international operation. Armed guards stood at the perimeter. Experts flew in from around the world. And Emma, still just 7 years old, found herself at the center of a story that was rapidly growing beyond anything she could have imagined. Her parents had taken her to a hotel in Burlington, the nearest city large enough to offer both anonymity and comfort. But even there, reporters had found them. Camera crews camped outside. Her father's phone rang constantly with interview requests, book deals, movie offers. Her mother handled it all with a fierce protectiveness, saying no to almost everything, shielding Emma from the chaos as best she could. But Emma didn't want to be shielded entirely. She wanted to know what was happening to the things she'd found. So, on the 5th day after her rescue, when Agent Torrens asked if Emma and her family would visit the site for an official debriefing, she jumped at the chance. The drive back to Frost Hollow felt different in daylight, with clear roads and her parents beside her. Emma pressed her face to the window, trying to reconcile the terrifying white void of her memory with the beautiful winter landscape passing by. The mountains looked peaceful now, their snow-covered slopes sparkling under brilliant blue sky. When they arrived at the cottage, Emma barely recognized it. The clearing had been transformed into a secure compound. A chain-link fence surrounded the entire area. Guard stations marked the entrance. The cottage itself was enclosed in a protective structure, a temporary building erected to shield it from the elements while work continued below. Inside, the warmth was artificial now, provided by industrial heaters rather than the mysterious fire that had burned in the hearth. Emma felt a pang of sadness at that. The magic of the place had been replaced by efficiency. Agent Torrens met them at the entrance, along with Dr. Sarah Calloway, the Smithsonian curator who'd examined the journal. "Emma," Dr. Calloway said warmly, "thank you for coming back. We have so much to show you." They led Emma and her parents down into the tunnel. It was different now, too, lit by strings of LED lights that turned the ice walls into something from a science fiction movie. The objects frozen in the ice seemed more vivid now, more real, and Emma realized that before, in the beam of her failing flashlight, she'd only seen hints of what was actually there. "We've identified most of the items in the ice," Dr. Calloway explained as they walked. "They're artifacts the Richters embedded deliberately, a kind of catalogue. Each one corresponds to something in the vault. See this coin? It matches a collection of Roman currency we found. This book? Part of a medieval manuscript collection. It's brilliant, really. They created a visual index." The ice cavern had been transformed as well. Scaffolding now supported a network of platforms and walkways. The massive vault door stood open, and beyond it, Emma could see dozens of people working carefully, cataloguing and preserving. Dr. Calloway guided them to a section that had been set up as a viewing area. On tables under protective covers were some of the treasures Emma had glimpsed that first night. But now, properly lit and displayed, their true nature was revealed. "Emma," Dr. Calloway said softly, "do you understand what you found?" Emma shook her head, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of it all. Dr. Calloway picked up a tablet and pulled up a series of images. "This painting here, this is a Monet, Water Lilies series. It was stolen from a private collection in Paris in 1940. We've been searching for it for 74 years. It's worth approximately $45 million. She swiped to another image. This sculpture, a Rodin, missing since 1943, $20 million. This necklace belonged to the Duchess of Windsor, thought lost when she fled France, $18 million. This manuscript, an original Gutenberg Bible page, priceless. Image after image, piece after piece. Each one a treasure, each one a story, each one thought lost forever. "In total," Dr. Calloway said, her voice thick with emotion, "you found 237 items. The current estimated value is $275 million. But Emma, the cultural value is beyond measure. You found pieces of human history that we thought were erased. You gave them back to the world." Emma's mother squeezed her hand. Emma looked up at her, saw tears on her mother's cheeks. "You did something extraordinary, baby," Rachel whispered. But Emma was looking at something else on the tablet, a photograph of children's toys, the wooden horse, the rag doll, the marbles. "What about Clara's things?" she asked. "The toys I found in the cottage?" Dr. Calloway smiled. "Those we're treating very specially. Come with me." She led them to a different section of the vault where a smaller workstation had been set up. Here, the Richter family's personal items were being preserved and catalogued. The journal lay open in a protective case. Photographs were being digitized. Letters were being translated. "We found Clara," Dr. Calloway said gently. "Clara Richter. She's alive, Emma. She's 86 years old now and living in Seattle. When we contacted her and told her what you'd found, she broke down. She thought everything from her childhood was gone forever. She has memories of that cottage, of playing there, of her father being gone for long periods working on something secret in the basement. But she was only 6 when they left. She barely remembered the details." Emma's heart leaped. "Can I meet her? Can I give her back her doll?" Dr. Calloway's eyes glistened. "She's flying here next week for that exact reason. She asked specifically to meet you, Emma. She said any child brave enough to find her father's legacy deserved to be the one to return her childhood to her." The days until Clara Richter's arrival felt endless. Emma went back to school, but everything felt different. Her classmates treated her like a celebrity. Her teacher asked her to present about her experience to the class. The principal invited local news to film her talking about the importance of preserving history. Emma did her best, but she felt disconnected from it all. The attention, the praise, the way adults kept telling her how special she was. None of it felt as real as those hours in the cottage, alone with the fire and the secrets and the weight of discovery. What she wanted most was to understand why it had happened to her. Of all the people who could have found the vault, why a 7-year-old girl lost in a storm? She asked her mother about it one evening as Rachel tucked her into bed. "Do you think it was meant to be? That I was supposed to find it?" Rachel smoothed Emma's hair back from her forehead. "I think the world works in mysterious ways. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was fate. But I know this. You were brave when it mattered. You kept your head when you were scared. And when you found something precious, your first instinct was to share it, not keep it. That says everything about who you are." Emma thought about that as she drifted towards sleep. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe it didn't matter why. Maybe what mattered was what she chose to do with it. The day Clara Richter arrived, Emma's parents drove her back to Burlington to meet the woman at her hotel. Emma had dressed carefully, wearing her best dress, the blue one with white flowers that her grandmother had sent for her birthday. She clutched the rag doll carefully wrapped in tissue paper in her lap. Clara Richter was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun, and eyes that were still sharp and bright despite her age. She stood in the hotel lobby with the aid of a cane. But when she saw Emma, she straightened, and for a moment, Emma could see the little girl she had once been. "Emma," Clara said, her voice accented but clear. "Come here, child." Emma approached slowly, suddenly shy, but Clara reached out with one weathered hand and touched Emma's cheek with such gentleness that Emma's nervousness melted away. "You found my home," Clara said softly. "You found my father's dream. You found the part of my childhood I thought was lost forever." Emma held out the wrapped doll. "This is yours." Her name was on her dress. Clara, 1938. Clara's hands shook as she took the package. She unwrapped it slowly, reverently, and when she saw the doll's button eyes and faded dress, she made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Liesel. I called her Liesel, after The Sound of Music, even though that movie wouldn't come out for decades. I just liked the name." She held the doll close, and tears ran down her lined face. "I remember the day Papa gave her to me. I was 4 years old. He said, 'This doll will keep you safe, Clara. She will watch over you when I cannot.' And she did, until the day we had to leave." Clara looked at Emma with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. "Do you know what my father did, Emma? Do you truly understand?" Emma nodded slowly. "He saved beautiful things from being destroyed. He hid them so the bad people couldn't take them." "Yes," Clara said, "but more than that. He believed that art and beauty belonged to everyone, not just the rich, not just the powerful, not just one country or one people. He believed that destroying art was destroying part of the human soul. So he risked everything, his life, his family's safety, everything, to preserve it. She sat down in a nearby chair, still clutching the doll. Emma sat beside her. We lived in Hamburg originally. Papa was the curator of a small museum. When the Nazis came to power, they began burning books, seizing paintings they called degenerate, looting from Jewish families who were being persecuted. Papa was horrified. He and several other curators formed a secret network. They would mark certain pieces as destroyed or transferred to Berlin, but actually they would smuggle them out. Clara's eyes grew distant with memory. My mother's family had a cottage in America, in Vermont. They had immigrated decades before but kept the property. It was perfect, remote, forgotten. Papa spent 2 years secretly building the vault. He told everyone he was in America helping with museum exchanges, but really, he was creating a sanctuary. How did he make the ice tunnel? Emma asked, fascinated. Clara smiled. Papa was not just a curator. He was an engineer, brilliant with mechanics and natural systems. He discovered a natural ice cave beneath the cottage, formed by underground springs that freeze in a very specific way. The ice there doesn't melt, even in summer. Something about the temperature and the mineral content keeps it stable. He saw it as a gift, a natural preservation system. So he enhanced it, created the tunnel, built the vault at the end. It took him 2 years and the help of 3 other men who shared his vision. She looked at Emma. Between 1939 and 1944, Papa and his network saved 237 pieces. Everyone documented, everyone catalogued, everyone hidden with the hope that after the war they could be returned. But Papa died in 1944 in a car accident that may not have been an accident. Mama died 6 months later of a broken heart. My brother and I were separated, sent to different relatives. The secret of the vault died with them. Didn't you remember? Emma asked. Didn't you try to find it? Clara shook her head sadly. I was 6 when we left. I remembered the cottage, but not where it was exactly. The property records had been deliberately obscured to protect it. I tried for years to find it, spent thousands of dollars on researchers and investigators, but the trail was too cold, the records too well hidden. I eventually gave up, thought it was lost forever. She took Emma's hand. And then you, a little girl lost in a storm, stumbled into my childhood home and found what dozens of experts could not. Do you know what I think? Emma shook her head. I think Papa was watching over you. I think he guided you there because he knew you would do the right thing. In his journal, he wrote that a child would find it. Everyone thought he meant it metaphorically, but he meant it literally. He knew that only someone with a pure heart, someone not corrupted by greed or politics, would understand what to do with what they found. Over the next several hours, Clara told Emma stories about her father, about growing up in the cottage during the summers, about the mysterious work Papa did in the basement that they were never allowed to see. She described elaborate games of hide and seek in the surrounding woods, of picking berries with her mother, of winter nights by the fire listening to Papa read from books in German and English. That fire, Clara said with wonder. It never went out completely. Papa designed it somehow with a special system. He said it was so the cottage would never be truly abandoned, so it would always be ready to welcome someone who needed it. And it welcomed you. She looked at Emma seriously. Now comes the hard part. The lawyers, the governments, the museums, they're all fighting over what happens to the collection. Some pieces have clear ownership, families that can be traced. Others are more complicated. There are legal battles ahead that will take years. Emma's stomach sank. So people are going to fight over it. That's not what your father wanted. No, Clara agreed. But I'm trying to honor his wishes. I've established the Richter Foundation in his name. Our goal is to ensure every piece goes where it belongs, whether that's to a museum, a family, or a public collection. And Emma, I'd like you to be part of it. Emma blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm just a kid. Clara smiled. You're the child my father wrote about, the one who found his legacy. I think you should have a voice in what happens to it. Not a legal voice, you're too young for that, but a moral one. When we have to make difficult decisions about where things should go, I want your input. Will you do that?" Emma looked at her parents, who nodded encouragingly. She looked back at Clara, at this woman who carried history in her bones and kindness in her eyes. "Yes," Emma said. "I'll help. Your father saved all those beautiful things. We should make sure they end up where they can do the most good." Clara pulled Emma into a hug, the ragdoll pressed between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me back my father's dream." The next day, Emma and her family accompanied Clara back to the cottage site. The old woman had insisted on seeing it, despite the difficult terrain and cold weather. They'd arranged for a snowmobile to take her most of the way, and Emma rode with her, holding tight as they bounced over the frozen trail. When Clara first saw the cottage, surrounded now by security and equipment and people, she wept. "It's smaller than I remember," she said through tears, "but it's exactly the same." They helped her inside, and she moved through the space like she was walking through a dream. She touched the rocking chair, the table, the shelves. "This was Mama's chair," she said. "This table, we ate breakfast here every morning. These shelves, Papa built them himself." She paused at the bed where Emma had found the toys. "This was my bed. Johann slept in a loft above." She looked up at the ceiling, and sure enough, Emma could see the remains of a ladder and a small sleeping platform. Clara knelt with difficulty and reached under the bed. Her hand searched, feeling along the frame. "There," she said triumphantly. She pulled out a small wooden box, so covered in dust and frost it was nearly invisible. Inside were more treasures, personal ones. A lock of baby hair tied with ribbon. A child's drawing of a family. A letter in a child's handwriting that began, "Dear Papa, I miss you when you are away." Clara held these items like they were made of light. "I wrote this," she said, pointing to the letter. "I was 5. I didn't understand where he went or why. I just knew he was gone a lot and I missed him." She looked at Emma. "He was saving the world's beauty, and I was angry he wasn't home for dinner. That's the sacrifice he made, the sacrifice my family made. We gave up time together so that someday, generations from now, people we would never meet could stand in front of a Monet or hold a rare book and feel what we felt, that connection to something larger than ourselves." Dr. Calloway, who had accompanied them, spoke up gently. "Clara, we've been wanting to ask your permission for something. We'd like to turn the cottage into a museum, a memorial to your father and the others who worked with him. We could tell the story of what they did, show some of the pieces they saved, explain the network that existed to preserve art during the war. Would that be acceptable?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, but on one condition. The cottage must remain simple as it was. No grand renovations, no modern additions. Let people see it as it was, as my family knew it. Let them understand that extraordinary things came from ordinary places, done by ordinary people who chose to be brave." She turned to Emma. "And there should be a place for you in the story. The girl who found it, the one Papa wrote about. Future children should know that someone their age made this discovery, should know that being young doesn't mean being powerless." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "I just got lost in a storm." "No," Clara said firmly. "You got lost, yes, but then you were found. Found by something greater than chance. And when you discovered the vault, you could have kept it secret, could have tried to take something for yourself. But you didn't. You told the world immediately. That's character, Emma. That's the kind of person my father hoped would find his legacy." They spent the rest of the day at the cottage, Clara sharing memories, Emma listening with rapt attention. By the time the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, Emma felt like she understood something profound about courage and sacrifice and the long arc of history. As they prepared to leave, Clara took Emma's hand one more time. "Whatever comes next, Whatever happens with the collection, with the lawsuits, with all the complicated adult things, remember this. You were the bridge between my father's time and ours. You connected past and present. That's a sacred role, Emma. Don't ever forget it." Emma nodded solemnly. "I won't. I promise." In the weeks that followed, Emma's life slowly returned to something resembling normal. The reporters moved on to other stories. School became routine again, but Emma was changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. She read everything she could about World War II, about art preservation, about the networks of people who had risked their lives to save cultural treasures. She learned about the monuments men, about hidden caches discovered across Europe, about families who had hidden Jewish neighbors and priceless artworks in the same breath. She learned that bravery came in many forms, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply refuse to let beauty be destroyed. The Richter Foundation began its work, and, true to Clara's word, Emma was consulted. When there was a question about whether a painting should go to a museum or be returned to the family it was stolen from, Emma was asked her opinion. When there was debate about whether to sell a piece to fund preservation of others, Emma's voice was heard alongside experts and lawyers. She didn't always understand the legal complexities or the historical nuances, but she understood fairness, and she understood that Wilhelm Richter had hidden these treasures not for profit, but for protection. That guiding principle helped resolve more disputes than all the legal arguments combined. By spring, 6 months after her discovery, the first pieces were being returned. A Monet went back to the family it had been stolen from, now living in Montreal. They wept when they saw it, this painting their grandfather had described to them, but they'd never thought they'd see. Emma watched the reunion on a video call and felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with treasure and everything to do with healing. A collection of rare books went to the Holocaust Museum, where they would be preserved and displayed as testament to what had been saved despite everything. A sculpture was returned to a museum in Prague that had been bombed during the war and rebuilt. One by one, the pieces found their homes. Emma kept a notebook given to her by Clara, where she recorded where each piece went and why. It became her project, her purpose, and slowly she began to understand that finding the vault hadn't been the end of her story. It was just the beginning. 10 years passed like water flowing under a bridge, steady and inevitable. Emma Chen was 17 now, standing at the threshold between childhood and adulthood, forever marked by that snowy day when she was 7. The world had moved on from the headlines about the little girl who found a fortune, but Emma had never truly left that cottage behind. It lived in her, shaped her, guided every decision she made about who she wanted to become. The cottage itself had been transformed into exactly what Clara had envisioned, a small but powerful museum dedicated to the Richter legacy and the broader story of art preservation during wartime. Visitors came from around the world to walk through the simple stone rooms where Emma had taken shelter, to see the fireplace with its hidden door, and to descend into the ice tunnel that still glittered with embedded artifacts like stars frozen in a glacier. Emma visited often, usually alone, drawn back to the place that had changed everything. On this particular Saturday in October, she stood in the Cottage Museum gift shop, helping Mrs. Patterson, the curator, sort through a new shipment of educational materials. At 17, Emma was tall and thoughtful, her dark hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes carrying a seriousness that made her seem older than her years. "Emma, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, "there's someone here to see you, a young woman from Austria. She says it's important." Emma looked up from the box of books she'd been unpacking. In the doorway stood a woman in her mid-20s with blonde hair and uncertain eyes. She held a worn leather folder against her chest like a shield. "Emma Chen?" the woman asked in accented English. "I'm sorry to come without appointment. My name is Katerina Hoffman. I think your discovery might have saved something that belongs to my family." Emma's heart quickened. Even after all these years, she never tired of these moments. "Please, come sit down. Tell me everything." They settled at a small table near the window, autumn light streaming in. Katerina opened the folder carefully and pulled out an old photograph, the paper yellowed and creased from being handled countless times. "This is my great-great-grandmother, Elise Hoffman," Katerina began. "She was Jewish, living in Vienna when the Nazis came. This photograph was taken in 1937 at her 60th birthday. Do you see what she's wearing?" Emma leaned closer. In the photo, an elegant older woman sat in a chair, her neck adorned with an elaborate necklace of what appeared to be diamonds and emeralds arranged in an intricate floral pattern. "It's beautiful," Emma said. "It was called the Vienna Rose," Katerina explained, her voice tight with emotion. "It had been in our family for 4 generations, created in 1872 by a master jeweler. When the Nazis began seizing Jewish property, Elise gave the necklace to a neighbor, a museum curator, begging him to hide it to keep it safe. She hoped that after the war, when things were better, she could reclaim it. But Elise died in Auschwitz in 1943. The necklace was presumed lost." Tears welled in Katerina's eyes. "Until 3 weeks ago, when the Richter Foundation contacted us. They said they had found it, catalogued in Wilhelm Richter's records. They said it was hidden in the vault beneath this cottage. They said a little girl had discovered it." Emma felt her own eyes stinging. "You're here to claim it." Katerina nodded. "But more than that, I wanted to meet you, to thank you. Because of you, I can touch something my great-great-grandmother held. I can wear something she wore. She died in horror, but this piece of her, this beauty she tried to save, survived. You gave that back to us." Emma reached across the table and took Katerina's hand. "Your great-great-grandmother gave it to Wilhelm Richter to protect. He kept it safe. I just found where he'd hidden it. The courage was all theirs." "But you recognized its importance," Katerina insisted. "You could have walked past that fireplace. You could have ignored the hidden door. You could have kept the discovery secret, but you didn't. You told the world, and because of that, my family's history isn't completely erased." They talked for over an hour, Katerina sharing stories about Elise that had been passed down through generations, Emma listening and taking notes in the journal she still kept, the one Clara had given her a decade ago. Before Katerina left, she pulled something else from her folder. "This is for you," she said, handing Emma an envelope. "A letter from my grandmother. She's 93 now, Elise's granddaughter. She wanted you to have her words." That evening in her bedroom at home, Emma opened the letter. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Dear Emma, I was 11 years old when my grandmother Elise was taken away. I remember her holding my face in her hands and telling me to be brave, to remember that beauty and love are stronger than hate, no matter what the world tries to tell us. I remember her necklace, how it caught the light, how she would let me try it on and pretend I was a princess. When she gave it away to be hidden, I thought I would never see it again, thought that last memory of beauty was all I would have. I am 93 years old now. I have lived a long life, but I have carried the weight of loss every single day. And then they called us. They said the Vienna Rose had been found. They said a child had discovered it in a secret vault, had made sure it was returned to us. I wept for 3 days. Not just for the necklace, though it is precious, but for what it represents. It represents the fact that even in the darkest times, there were people who chose to preserve rather than destroy. There were people like Wilhelm Richter who risked everything to save beauty. And there are people like you, Emma, who in your innocence and courage gave these treasures back to the world. You were 7 years old when you found the vault. The same age I was when my world fell apart. Maybe that's fitting. Maybe it took the pure heart of a child to heal what the hatred of adults had broken. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for being brave in the storm. Thank you for opening that door. Thank you for giving me back a piece of my grandmother before I leave this world. You have given me the greatest gift, the knowledge that love and beauty can outlast evil. With endless gratitude, Ruth Hoffman. Emma read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her mother found her that way and held her, not asking questions, just offering comfort. Finally, Emma whispered, "Mom, do you think I did enough?" There were 237 pieces in that vault. Some are still in legal battles. Some families we still haven't found. What if I missed something? What if there are people out there who deserve to get something back and didn't? Rachel pulled back and looked at her daughter seriously. Emma, you were 7 years old. You found something extraordinary, and you told the truth about it. Everything that's happened since, all the returns, all the healing, all the justice, that happened because you made that one choice. You've done more than enough. You've done everything right. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her work wasn't finished. The next morning, she drove to Burlington to meet with Clara Richter. The old woman was 96 now, frail but still sharp, still passionate about her father's legacy. They met at Clara's apartment, a small place filled with photographs and memories. Emma, Clara said warmly, taking her hand, I can always tell when you're troubled. Sit, tell me. Emma shared the story of Katerina and her family, of the letter from Ruth Hoffman. It made me wonder how many other families are out there, still looking, still hoping. The Foundation has done incredible work, but there must be more we can do. Clara smiled, a knowing look in her ancient eyes. You're ready. Ready for what? To take on more responsibility. Emma, I'm 96 years old. I won't be here much longer. I've been waiting for you to be old enough, mature enough to understand what I'm about to propose. She pulled out a folder, surprisingly thick. These are all the pieces still in dispute, still unclaimed, still unresolved. 63 items from the original vault. Some are tied up in international law, some have competing claims, some we simply cannot find the rightful owners for. Emma's eyes widened. 63? I thought we were almost done. So did I, Clara admitted. But the deeper we dig, the more complicated it becomes. This painting was stolen by the Nazis, yes, but from a museum that had acquired it through colonial exploitation in Africa. Who does it belong to? The museum? The country it was taken from? The descendants of the original artists? These aren't simple questions. She pushed the folder toward Emma. I'm leaving you my position on the Foundation board. My lawyers have the papers drawn up. When I'm gone, you'll be the voice of moral authority, just as you've been informally for years. But it will be official, permanent. You'll help decide where these last pieces go. Emma felt the weight of it, the responsibility. Clara, I'm only 17. I'm not qualified to— You're the most qualified person on earth, Clara interrupted firmly. You found them. You understood their importance immediately. You've spent 10 years learning their stories. And most importantly, you don't have a personal stake in any of them. You're not trying to profit or gain prestige. You simply want them to end up where they belong. That's exactly what my father would have wanted. Emma looked down at the folder, then back at Clara. What if I make mistakes? What if I choose wrong? Then you'll make mistakes, Clara said simply. But you'll make them with integrity. That's all anyone can do. She reached out and touched Emma's cheek with a trembling hand. I don't have children of my own, Emma. You're the closest thing I have to a granddaughter. Let me leave this legacy in your hands. Let me know that my father's work will continue with someone who understands what it truly meant. Emma felt tears building again. I'll do my best. I promise I'll honor what your father started. Clara smiled. I know you will. That's why I'm not worried. Clara Richter passed away peacefully 3 months later, on a cold January morning. She was buried next to her brother in a small cemetery in Seattle, but her memorial service was held at the Cottage Museum in Vermont. People came from around the world, families who had received back-stolen heirlooms, museum directors whose collections had been enriched, historians whose understanding of the war years had been deepened by Wilhelm's meticulous records. Emma spoke at the service, her voice steady despite her grief. Clara once told me that her father believed art and beauty belonged to everyone, that destroying it was destroying part of the human soul. She spent the last decade of her life ensuring that his vision became reality. Every piece returned, every family reunited with their history, Every museum able to display treasures thought lost forever. That was Clara honoring her father. And now, it's our turn to honor her by continuing the work. After the service, as people gathered in the cottage sharing stories and memories, Emma stood alone by the fireplace. The hidden door was open now, permanently displayed so visitors could see the beginning of the ice tunnel. She looked into that darkness and remembered being 7 years old, terrified and freezing, finding warmth and mystery in equal measure. "I hope I make you proud," she whispered to the ghosts of Wilhelm and Clara, to the memory of that scared little girl she'd been. "I hope I'm worthy of this." A hand touched her shoulder. Emma turned to find Dr. Calloway, older now, but still passionate about the work. "She knew you would be," Dr. Calloway said softly. "Clara told me right before the end that giving this responsibility to you was the easiest decision she'd ever made. She said you were exactly what your father had written about in his journal: innocent wisdom, pure purpose, a child's heart in the best possible way." Emma wiped her eyes. "There's still so much to do, 63 pieces still unresolved." "Then we'll resolve them," Dr. Calloway said firmly. "Together. The foundation isn't just you, Emma. We're all in this, all committed to finishing what Wilhelm started and Clara continued. You're not alone." And she wasn't. Over the next year, Emma threw herself into the work with a dedication that surprised even her. She was finishing her senior year of high school while also attending foundation meetings, consulting with international lawyers, speaking to families who thought their heritage was lost forever. One case in particular consumed her attention. A painting, a small watercolor of a village scene, unsigned and seemingly unimportant. It had been catalogued by Wilhelm as item number 147, removed from a home in Prague, 1941. But Wilhelm's notes were frustratingly vague. No family name, no clear ownership history, just coordinates and a description. From the house where hope lived. Emma researched obsessively. She learned about the neighborhood those coordinates corresponded to, about the families who had lived there, about what had happened when the Nazis occupied Prague. She connected with local historians, with survivors groups, with genealogists. She spent countless hours staring at that simple watercolor, trying to understand why Wilhelm had saved it, why he'd given it such a poetic designation. Finally, after 8 months of searching, she found a lead. An elderly man in Toronto, a Holocaust survivor, responded to an inquiry she'd posted on a genealogy forum. His family had lived at those coordinates. His aunt had been a painter, nothing famous, just someone who loved to create. She'd painted scenes of their village, given them as gifts to neighbors and friends. When the family was deported, all her paintings were thought destroyed. Emma arranged a video call. The man, Isaac Goldstein, was 91 years old, speaking from a nursing home with his granddaughter's help. When Emma showed him the watercolor on screen, he gasped. "That's Aunt Miriam's work," he said, his voice shaking. "I'd know her style anywhere. She painted this before everything happened." He leaned closer to the screen, squinting. "Look at the corner there, that little house with the blue door. That was where she lived. She always included it, her signature instead of a name." His granddaughter, a woman in her 40s named Rebecca, squeezed his shoulder. "Grandpa, this is the first of Aunt Miriam's paintings we've ever found. We thought they were all destroyed." Emma felt that familiar warmth in her chest, the feeling she got every time a piece found its home. "Mr. Goldstein, this painting belongs to you and your family. We'll arrange for it to be sent to you as soon as possible." Isaac shook his head, tears streaming down his weathered face. "No, you misunderstand. Keep it in the museum. Display it. Let people see it. Miriam would want that. She always said art should be shared, not hidden away. But could you put a plaque with it? Tell her story. Tell people that she was real, that she lived, that she created beauty even knowing what was coming." Emma nodded, her own vision blurring with tears. "We'll tell her story. I promise. Everyone who sees this painting will know about Miriam Goldstein and how she made beauty in dark times. "Thank you," Isaac whispered. "Thank you for giving her back her voice." That conversation changed something fundamental in Emma. She realized that the true value of what she'd found had never been the $275 million price tag. It was this: giving voice to the silenced, returning dignity to the forgotten, proving that even in humanity's darkest hours, there were people who chose creation over destruction. She made a decision. That evening, she called an emergency meeting of the foundation board. Standing before them, 17 years old but speaking with authority earned through dedication, she proposed something radical. "The 63 remaining pieces," she said. "I think we should stop fighting about who owns them legally. Instead, we should ask who needs them most, not financially, but emotionally, culturally, spiritually. We should give them to communities and families and institutions that will use them to heal, to teach, to inspire." One of the lawyers frowned. "Emma, some of these pieces are worth millions. We can't just give them away based on feelings." "Why not?" Emma challenged. "Wilhelm Richter didn't save them to make money. He saved them because he believed beauty and culture were worth preserving." Clara agreed. "And I think if we really want to honor their legacy, we need to think bigger than legal ownership. We need to think about legacy." Dr. Calloway spoke up. "What exactly are you proposing?" Emma pulled out a document she'd been working on for weeks. "A new framework for distribution. For pieces with unclear ownership, we establish criteria: historical connection, cultural significance, educational potential, and community need. We bring in ethicists, historians, community leaders. We make decisions based on where each piece will do the most good." The room erupted in debate. Some board members loved it. Others thought it was naive, legally questionable, potentially disastrous. But Emma stood firm, channeling every ounce of conviction she'd built over 10 years of doing this work. Finally, the board chairman, an elderly art historian named Professor Chen, no relation but someone Emma had come to respect deeply, called for order. "Emma," he said, "what you're proposing is unprecedented. It's risky. It might mean lawsuits, criticism, years of complications. Are you prepared for that?" Emma thought about Isaac Goldstein, about Katerina Hoffman, about Ruth's letter, about Clara's final words. She thought about being 7 years old in a storm, finding shelter in an impossible cottage, discovering treasures that were never really about treasure at all. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm prepared, because it's the right thing to do." The vote was close, but it passed. The foundation would adopt Emma's framework. They would spend the next several years carefully, thoughtfully placing each of the 63 remaining pieces where they would create the most meaning, the most healing, the most good. The work was exhausting. Emma deferred college for a year to focus on it, despite her parents' concerns. She traveled to Prague, to Vienna, to Paris, to Jerusalem, meeting with communities, hearing stories, understanding contexts. She learned about colonial exploitation, about indigenous rights, about the complicated layers of ownership that went beyond simple legal title. Some decisions were heartbreaking. A sculpture claimed by 3 different families, all with legitimate cases. Emma spent weeks mediating, finally helping them reach a compromise. The sculpture would rotate between institutions in their 3 countries, spending 2 years in each location, ensuring all families could maintain connection. Other decisions were joyful. A collection of children's books, illustrated manuscripts from the 1930s, went to a school in a refugee camp in Jordan. Emma was there when they arrived, watched children who had lost everything light up at the sight of beautiful, carefully preserved stories. The joy on their faces was worth more than any price tag. By the time Emma turned 19, 47 of the 63 pieces had found their permanent homes. She'd learned more about history, culture, ethics, and humanity than any college could have taught her, and she'd discovered something about herself. This work, connecting past and present, healing old wounds through the careful placement of preserved beauty, this was her calling. She finally enrolled in college, choosing to study art history and international law, determined to develop the skills to do this work even better. But she remained on the foundation board, continued to be consulted on major decisions, kept her promise to Clara and Wilhelm. On her 20th birthday, Emma returned to the Cottage Museum alone. It was late March, the snow finally melting, revealing the earth beneath. She walked through the familiar space, now filled with displays telling the story of what had happened here, who had made it happen, and who had discovered it. There was a section about her, of course. Photographs of her at 7, wrapped in an emergency blanket after her rescue. Images of her over the years, growing up while helping return treasures to their rightful places. Quotes from her speeches and interviews, a replica of the journal Clara had given her, pages showing where different pieces had gone and why. Emma stood in front of a display case that held Liesel, Clara's rag doll, donated to the museum along with other Richter family items. Next to it was a photograph of 7-year-old Emma holding the doll, meeting Clara for the first time. Looking at it now, Emma could see the trajectory of her life beginning in that moment. She continued to the fireplace, looked into the tunnel that still glittered with frozen artifacts. A group of tourists was scheduled for a tour in an hour, but for now, she was alone with the ice and the memories. "I kept my promise," she said softly, speaking to Wilhelm, to Clara, to her 7-year-old self. "The pieces are finding their homes. People are learning the stories. Beauty is being shared, not hoarded. I hope that's what you wanted." The ice glittered in response, ancient and patient, keeping its secrets while giving up its treasures one by one. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Calloway. "We found the family for item 212. They're in Ethiopia. They've been looking for it for 70 years. Can you help us coordinate the return?" Emma smiled, typed back, "Of course, send me the details." There was always more work to do. Always another piece waiting to find its home. Always another family waiting to reclaim a fragment of their history. And Emma was ready for it, all of it, because a snowstorm had once led her to a cottage, and that cottage had led her to a purpose bigger than herself. She thought about how random it had seemed at the time. Getting separated from her parents, stumbling through the blizzard, finding this specific building in an entire mountain range. But now, looking back, it didn't feel random at all. It felt like destiny, like she'd been guided here for a reason. Maybe Wilhelm had been right when he wrote that a child would find it. Maybe he'd understood something profound about innocence and wisdom, about how sometimes the most important discoveries require someone who hasn't yet learned to ignore the impossible. Emma had been that child. She was becoming the adult who could finish what that child had started, and she was grateful every single day for the storm that had led her here. As she left the cottage that evening, the setting sun painting the snow in shades of gold and pink, Emma turned back one more time. The building looked peaceful, solid, eternal. A keeper of secrets that had finally been shared, a shelter that had saved lives in ways both immediate and lasting. "Thank you," Emma whispered to it, to Wilhelm, to Clara, to the 7-year-old girl she'd been, and the woman she was becoming. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters." Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to step through the door that fear would keep closed. Sometimes getting lost is how we find what we're truly meant to discover. And sometimes the greatest treasures aren't the ones we keep, but the ones we give away. As Emma Chen drove away from the cottage in the mountains where her life had changed forever, she carried with her not gold or jewels or priceless art, but something far more valuable. The knowledge that one person, even a 7-year-old girl lost in a storm, could make a difference that echoes through generations. She had found $275 million worth of treasure, yes, but more importantly, she had found her purpose. And in a world that often felt dark and cold as that blizzard had been, she had become a light guiding beauty and history and healing back to the people who needed them most. Because for Emma and for everyone whose lives were touched by her discovery, the real miracle wasn't what lay beneath the ice. It was what happened when one brave soul decided to look deeper, trust the mystery, and give back what had been lost. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible true stories are waiting for you. Click now to continue this journey with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that courage, no matter how small, can change the world.